Hello YouTube. So here's a little Sunday evening into Monday morning recording. I thought I would talk about this a little bit more. I had mentioned this previously on the last live stream episode, but I thought I would elaborate on it a little bit more and then kind of open it up and then also share a little piece of video from a past piece of content. Something that I like to do every now and then because especially when it fits the occasion. Now, the title of this one I'm not 100% sure, but I'm leaning towards something like, then what is the money for? And that's kind of in reference to the idea that if you're putting the money towards something, then you have certain expectations. And then when that's circumvented, then you wind up in some very interesting places. Now, in this case, what I'm starting off with is this screen share of this particular website. And I'll include a link in the description to it for you so you can check it out for yourself. This one is a site called penguinchronicles.com. And what they really kind of specialize in is talking about the different Pittsburgh Penguins jerseys. And they even do some photo match stuff related to it. They've got a marketplace. So it's really kind of a niche thing, but I thought it was kind of interesting, and this was brought to my attention, so I was able to take a closer look at it. And that is because in the course of this website, they decided to do an article on a very specific Mario Lemieux card. In this case, the 2009-2010 Upper Deck, the Cup, Mario Lemieux, Sidney Crosby tribute. So I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to show you the image here. The image in question is this card. It was based off the Sidney Crosby tribute. The reason it's called that is because that is the initial year of the Cup, which was the 05-06 Crosby year, and it was also the Ovechkin year where they both had rookie RPAs in it. So this is the design that borrowed off of. And the whole tribute thing was that they actually had different veterans. I think Medano had one in this as well, so I have that one in the collection somewhere. And they basically borrowed the same design and included these veteran players and included an autograph patch. Now, the reason for the whole article is that, as I mentioned, they specialize in looking at different Pittsburgh Penguin jerseys over time. And Lemieux is obviously the perfect example of somebody they would look into. And what struck them was the actual patch itself related to this card. And what they did in this article, which I recommend you checking out if you're kind of curious, I thought it was very interesting, but I'm going to branch off of it and then build on a separate question that I want to ask you. And the idea here is that because it's the Crosby tribute, they've got this checklist full of these veteran players, and they include this piece of memorabilia on it. And you can make out most of the wording on it, and it says, "Congratulations, you have received a trading card with game-used hockey memorabilia and an autograph of Mario Lemieux." I'll get back to that wording here in a second. The memorabilia has been certified to us as having been used in an official NHL game, and the autograph is signed in the presence of a company representative or sent from and certified as to its authenticity by Mario Lemieux. We hope you enjoy this piece of hockey history, and as we continue to keep you as close as you can get, enjoy your memorabilia autograph card. Now, that sounds all well and good, but if you paid attention to the wording and the way it was phrased, is that it talked about an autograph of Mario Lemieux and it talked about game-used hockey memorabilia. But the wording of it actually leaves it a little bit open-ended, and that kind of leads to the context of this article. They were taking a look at it from their perspective, doing various comparisons to the different types of Penguin jerseys that they had worn throughout the entirety of Mario Lemieux's career. And I'm not going to read over all of this because they did a really good job comparing it and showing example images to kind of give you a bit more of a sense of it. And they did this whole research to try to put the pieces together and try to figure out what year this jersey could have come from. And what they did, and I'll kind of give you the conclusion, and they went through all the different materials, all the different eras of it, including all the different components of it that could have matched that type of material and the type of numbering that it showed. Now, the key takeaway here is the conclusion, which is included here. After careful review of the entirety of Mario Lemieux's career and jerseys that he wore, I can conclusively say that Mario Lemieux never wore a jersey in an official NHL game as a card attest at any point during his entire playing career. Now, if you are familiar with trading cards from the Panini side of it, where you've got a lot of different products like Immaculate and even some Flawless, although Flawless I think is more game used than anything else, something like Immaculate could have a jersey piece or a patch piece that could say not from any specific game or a specific player or a specific event. It's got all these caveats included in it. So it kind of leads back to the question that at the end of the day, when you're buying this, and that was my original question, like what is the money for, is that when you're buying a card like this, obviously this card holds a lot of value to a Mario Lemieux collector, and you are getting a Mario Lemieux autograph on there, and the wording of it is that it's an autograph of Mario Lemieux, so they are certifying to that piece of it, and they're saying this is a game-used hockey memorabilia, but the way it's phrased, you could kind of get away with it if you really wanted to by saying it didn't necessarily say game-used hockey memorabilia of Mario Lemieux. And as this examination looks at, their conclusion was that it doesn't come from Mario Lemieux. It could be a game used piece from another player. It could be a game used piece from a different jersey of a different era. The point that they got to is they just can't pin it to something that Mario Lemieux would have worn. Now the question is, if you are aware of that, does it make any difference in terms of the pricing that you would be willing to pay for this? Because the wording on it is game used hockey memorabilia. So you've got the game used included in the wording. And it also says the memorabilia has been certified to us as having been used in an official NHL game. It just doesn't say explicitly by Mario Lemieux. So they do have a bit of an out, but at the same time, I guess when you're buying it, you really are thinking that you're connecting the two and two together. Even with the phrasing and everything, you're saying you're including game used and you're saying official NHL game. So my expectation is that it's Mario Lemieux included in it. Now, my point that I wanted to get with this is that the question is it really all about the memorabilia and the autograph, or is it about the aesthetic of the card, kind of in relation to it? And the example that I'm going to use out of this is going to be based on national treasures. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then I'm going to lead to a little clip from a conversation that I had with Karvin Cheung. And Karvin Cheung, if you're familiar with, is one of the people responsible for the cup in hockey and also for Exquisite in basketball and for several high-end brands in Panini. So he's got an extensive history in the hobby working on these different products. And, his nickname, the Architect, came kind of as a result of that because he was directly involved in a lot of these different products. And he's got his opinion on kind of where the value proposition lies in these kind of products. But I just thought this article brought an interesting thing to the forefront that I wanted to share with you. So as I said, I'll include a link in the description to the article, and I do recommend you check it out because I think it brings up some interesting questions that I would leave to you to answer for yourself, but I'd be curious kind of what your stance would be on this, looking at it as the perspective. If you were a buyer for something like this, does the fact that it may or may not, and in this case it looks like it isn't, given the analysis done by this article, that this is not a game-used Mario Lemieux piece, but it may be game used, and it might be in an NHL game, but not necessarily to the player depicted. Does that change your opinion of the card, and does that change the perspective value that you may place on it? Or is it a situation where you're more about the aesthetics, and that's what you're paying for? Now, let me use an example here. I'm going to change the screen share. I'm going to use a little editing magic to move to a different screen share here. Now, what I want to look at here is actually from Instagram. It is an image from a fellow Mike Medano collector, and it's for a very specific card that I want to focus on. This card is what is known as the Buried Treasure. This was from the brief foray that Panini had in the hockey card market. This is from 2013-2014, Panini National Treasures. Obviously, super high-end brand, National Treasures. And this was, like I said, a brief foray they had into hockey. Now, this is a really cool-looking card. This is an out of 10 card with an on-card autograph there. And you can see that, like, aesthetically, this card looks really great. And what you've got, kind of the appeal to it, is that you've got that medallion. And it's a medallion. It's a piece of metal that they kind of stuck onto it that is in the image of a Stanley Cup. And it kind of goes with that whole buried treasure theme. And there is a non-autograph version of this as well. And both of these are ones that at some point I would like to add to my collection. But one thing that has always been a little bit tricky with this one, and this has created kind of a hesitation about it for me, is that this one here is obviously the higher end piece. You've got a non-autograph version and you've got an autograph version. The non-autograph is numbered to a higher number, and the autograph version here is shown in this example that we've got here. They don't sell all the time, given that they are very tough to pull. But at the end of the day, if I remove the medallion from the equation and you really look at what it is, just take it for what it is that you're seeing on the screen, this is an on-card autograph out of 10. And based on the ones that have been offered to me in the past or ones that I've seen available for sale, the likelihood is I would probably have to pay somewhere, maybe in the range closing in on $1,000. And it's an autograph, on-card autograph, out of 10. Now, the problem that we run into here, now I'm actually switching this to another image here of a different card. This is obviously not out of 10, so I'm not calling it apples to apples, but this is an on-card autograph as well. My point isn't that these are comparable, because they're certainly not. Two completely different products, two completely different things. But my point here is this is a regular on-card autograph. Obviously, you expect this to be a very small fraction in terms of value compared to a lovely on-card autograph out of 10 from something like National Treasures. But the on-card part of it is the same. If I made this out of 10, would it make it closer? How close would the gap be? Now, something that I would give you that is much closer to apples would be something like the Cup. The Cup is the highest end brand that we have in hockey now. Well, I bought my fair share of on-card autographs, including on-card autographs that are numbered to 10 or less than 10. And I can tell you definitively that one that I'm waiting in the mail, so hopefully Canada Post gets its act together so I can get my card, is that one of the ones that I bought recently that should be the next item of mail that I receive, whenever that strike gets handled, is going to be a card from the Cup. It is going to be numbered to 9, so even lower than 10, out of the highest end brand possible. And I can assure you that that card, which also includes a piece of game-used memorabilia, or maybe it doesn't if you take the beginning of this video into consideration, who knows, but I'll get to that in a second. But the point is, this card is numbered to 9, it's got a game-used piece, presumably, and an on-card autograph, and aesthetically I think is very nice. But does it match up to that Buried Treasure one? Maybe, maybe not. I guess it's in the eye of the beholder. The point is that I've got potentially a piece of memorabilia and an on-card auto from the highest end brand, and I can tell you right now, it costs me less than the ones for that Buried Treasure that I've been offered in the past. So how is an on-card autograph out of 10 that contains nothing else other than a very pretty medallion, a metallic piece that's been attached to it that has no other inherent value, because there have been cards in the past that actually have sterling silver in them, or, if you go to Panini, you can find cards with gold bars in them and things like that, something that may have some intrinsic value beyond the card itself. You've got literally a piece of metal, a hunk of metal that's been stuck onto it. You make it numbered to 10, and then you say that that card could command that kind of value. Other than the aesthetic, what is the justification? Even the out of 10 doesn't get you there. The on card doesn't get you there. It's the totality of its parts more than the individual components that make that other card that I showed you worth so much more than the card I'm showing you on the screen, or even the card from the cup that I'm describing to you that I will be getting in hand that costs me less than what that National Treasures card would end up costing me, most likely, if I end up buying it. It's that price point that has always given me pause and hesitation, because for me, I just don't value it at that level. And that's a question that each collector has to kind of ask themselves. Now, I want to share with you a little video clip that I'm going to switch to here and again. So I'll use a little more editing magic to get us back over there. And this is a conversation I had with Karvin Cheung several years ago. We actually talked for hours and hours and hours over 2 conversations, but I'm going to focus on a very specific piece. I'll include a link in the description to it for you, but I'm also going to give you a timestamp, because I did actually put various timestamps in it so you can move forward or backward to any topic that you wanted to. And we had lengthy conversation about a lot of different things. So I'm going to play a clip for you, and then I'm going to come back and give some final thoughts on this. All right, now this is the editing magic here. This brings us to this conversation. I actually had this conversation with Karvin all the way back on my channel in November of 2020. So this is actually 4 years ago now at this point. So I didn't realize it was November. So it's actually been a little over 4 years ago that we had this conversation. And I did put timestamps on it, so you got the different chapters here. The piece that I'm going to fixate on for this case is going to be at an hour, 23 minutes and 25 seconds. So I've got a piece there. Game used versus player worn. So that actually kind of brings us back to the original, what the original article was discussing. And I want you to listen to what Karvin said. I kind of posed the question about the whole idea between these two things. And this is his concept of it. Again, Karvin being a person who was involved in Exquisite at Upper Deck, the Cup on the hockey side at Upper Deck, and then also various high-end brands at Panini. So he's got his opinions on it as someone who was directly and personally involved in getting those different sets off the ground that still exist to this day. So let's let him kind of give us a little bit of background on that, and I'll play this for you. You don't really have the game used jersey card anymore. You have the player worn / game used. It's the cop out where it's like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I can't say for sure. Maybe he wore it at a photo shoot, but it's like, but it has a really nice patch, so that's cool, right? It's like, but, well, if it's game used, it's cool. If it's something he wore for 5 minutes at a photo shoot, not so cool.
Right. Well, I mean, that's as I always say, let's not get into the game. I mean, are you really truly collecting it because it's a game used patch? If you are, then okay, then that makes sense. But are you collecting it because it's of the aesthetics of the patch itself, or the aesthetics of the card look? And to me, it's more about the card look. You can have, like, I remember doing some of these. The first year was the 04, 05 Ultimate, the big patches and all that, and that drove a lot of people to buy that Ultimate product, right? And then everyone complained about the pinheads and on top of it. I'm actually not a huge fan of those big patches, and I know I did it in Prime Hockey. We worked on it at Panini Prime Hockey. Immaculate Basketball had those immaculate patches. While I love the patches, I love the card design and the card look, and that's what attracts me to a card more than anything else. Because if I really want to,
I think that's very fair. The only question I would have, the only pushback I would have, because in general I'm totally with you. The aesthetics is super important,
right?
But the only pushback I would have on it is, if that's the case, though, if as a collector I don't know if it's really game used, then I'm not going to pay the premium. It can be a pretty card, but but I still hold game used in a little bit of a higher regard, because if I get that pretty patch from a game used, it's like double bonus. It's like, oh my God, this is excellent.
So here's where you can look at it. I mean, obviously everything's buyer beware, and you buy what you want to buy, right?
So there's quite a bit more to this conversation, and quite a bit more even to that answer. We actually went about it back and forth for quite a bit, but you can kind of get the sense. And the bottom line was that Karvin said that above all else, it was the aesthetic for him. And I think that's a very valid opinion to have, but it also kind of brings into question what I was asking a little bit earlier. So my question is, going forward and kind of going back to that article that started off this video that I wanted to talk about, is it about the aesthetic? And the only reason I pose that one question is that if the users know about it, and in turn they can make their own decision about what value they hold into it. That's why I gave you that National Treasures example. That's a situation where we all know what the situation is. It is an on-card autograph. It is a cool looking card, but that piece of metal that is in the shape of a Stanley Cup on it is not part of the Stanley Cup. It's nothing more than literally somebody was able to print themselves out, or I guess press a medallion that they glued onto the card. It's a cool aesthetic, but other than that, you have to decide for yourself whether an out of 10 autograph on card with a piece of metal on the side of it that has a cool aesthetic, if that's sufficient to make that additional value out of it. Whereas, again, something that has game used material to it, again, we'll always put the caveat given the article that we had at the beginning, but assuming it is game used. And the market has it at a certain value. How does this other thing have so much more value relative to it? That's a question that I would have for you. And that's a question that I would pose because I don't know the answer. I don't have an answer for you necessarily. I know what my preference is. If I'm paying a premium, I want a game used piece, and preferably I want a game used piece from the person that's depicted. And if it's phrased in kind of a deceptive way, because at least with Immaculate and some of those, it literally says not from any specific event or game. If that's the case, well, then we kind of know. You read the back of it, then at that point, you may as well just assume they pulled it off the rack and grabbed a piece. And if that's the case, then, pay accordingly. Price it accordingly. Because at least while it's still vague, we've gotten enough information that I'm just going to assume it's not game used. And then I will pay the price to that accordingly. Then it's strictly about the aesthetic. How does it look? Do I like it or not like it? But if it implies game used or says flat out game used, then I have certain expectations. Then I do want a little bit more information than what is provided here. And then my pricing has to be in line with where I value that thing. So I just thought it was very interesting, the article itself, and it really led down kind of a conversation about where the value lies in this. What is the aesthetic versus what is the perceived value of the composite parts that are comprised of this card? Because when we're talking about a card like this, we're talking about these different components. We're talking about the card itself, we're talking about potentially an autograph, and maybe a game used piece. Well, if we're talking about those three things, those are three separate things. How do you value the aesthetic of the card versus, the autograph that's on it? Because a sticker auto, you may think less of it. An on-card auto, you may value more, but it may be the same autograph. Well, how nice is the autograph? Is it a clean autograph? That may change your perception of it. And then a game used piece. Is it actually game used, or is it one of these situations where it's a little bit murky? It's left kind of open-ended. And even if it's game used, but it's like a napkin patch, is that as exciting to you as a nice looking aesthetic piece that has multiple colors and breaks? But maybe it's game used or maybe it isn't. These are all things that the individual collector can decide for themselves. But the question nonetheless remains then, what is the money for? What are we actually paying for in that situation? You individually, what is it that you're valuing? And that's a value judgment that you have to make for yourself. I can't answer that piece for you. And that's kind of where I'm going to leave it here because it is an open-ended question. I don't have a specific answer for you. I have my opinion. I will always value the game used piece a little bit more, but there is a healthy skepticism you have to put in there because it's impossible to say. Because even if it's got the right wording, well, how do you know? Unless you go into kind of the in-depth analysis that was done in that article that was included in the beginning. So I'll include a link in the article for you if you want to check it out for yourself. They did pretty interesting work. Again, you may question their methodology if you want, but at least they put together some of their information. They showed you some of their work and gave you the examples that they were using to look at it closer. And then at the same time, I'll also include a link to this conversation because we ended up talking about a lot of stuff in the course of this conversation, and there are timestamps in it. So if you want to skip ahead to a specific topic and get some thoughts from Karvin on that, that's really great. We had a fun conversation. It was actually a live stream I did at the time, and so that's why you saw a couple of comments pop up on the screen when I showed you that clip. And it was kind of interesting listening to Karvin, having the conversation back and forth. That was earlier days in the channel, but it was a fun conversation to have, and we covered a lot of ground. That's kind of why sometimes when some of this stuff comes up, I almost feel like going back to the archives because I went in and we had conversations like this back then when we had a lot of time on our hands. So with that said, that's it for this one. More videos coming up on the channel and live streams on Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then the podcast episodes will drop generally on Tuesday mornings every week. And then also at AMG Collectibles, if you haven't gotten enough content, there is some stuff we do on there with podcasts and live streams there as well. And as always, I do thank them for supporting the channel. So with that said, that'll be it from me. If you have any thoughts, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section about kind of where you stand on this concept. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.